go ahead and get us started. So welcome. Today we are talking about all things EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, largely in response to so many questions that we get from our customers at HowGood and what we hear from around the industry. It's definitely a topic of lots of questioning and conversation. And so we're so pleased to be bringing this to you all. My name is Eva Clark. I'm the head of marketing and communications at HowGood. And we have an incredible group here to talk through sort of all angles of EPR. We'll start with an overview, sort of the nuts and bolts. And again, this is in response to a lot of questions that we get from folks that we speak to in the food industry. We'll then hear from Dave Ford at the Ocean Plastics Leadership Network, really talking about sort of how we got here and where EPR is headed. Next, we'll go to a conversation with Sam Harrington over at Danone about sort of what it looks like on the ground and some more exciting conversation about really how they're leveraging EPR to drive sustainable packaging design. And then lastly, we'll turn to the sort of practical solutions available to you all for EPR reporting, and of course, open up for audience Q&A. So feel free to drop any questions that you have into the chat. We'll get to those at the end of the webinar. We welcome questions. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Rachel to get us started.
Thanks, Eva. Hi, my name is Rachel Calamani, and I'm the SVP of Growth and Innovation at HowGood. I'm so pleased to be here with this fabulous group today. So let's start at the very beginning. Pardon me. What is EPR? Well, EPR is a policy approach that shifts the financial and operational responsibility for a product's end-of-life management, like recycling, from local governments and consumers back to the producers. In the US, the current wave of EPR laws focus almost entirely on packaging. This includes food packaging, shipping boxes, consumer packaging, and transport packaging. Compliance is mandatory in states with active EPR laws, with each state on a different reporting timeline with slightly different requirements. Makes it sound easy, right? So the first question that everyone asks is, who is considered a producer? And unfortunately, the answer is a little complicated. The term producer extends beyond the manufacturer of the packaging material itself. For food companies, a producer is primarily defined as the company that is the brand owner or licenses the brand, but the details of the definition does differ a bit state by state. So we have California's definition, which prioritizes the manufacturer and the in-state brand owner. Colorado shifts the brand owner or importer or distributor if no brand owner is in-state, and Oregon focuses the brand owner, or if outside the US, the importer of that first sells the product into the state. So it can get really complicated quite quickly. So before we get into the details, I want to take a moment to just zoom out a bit. Why does EPR matter? And should you be prioritizing it amidst the ever-growing list of all those responsibilities that you're already tracking? Well, you should. EPR carries fines of tens of thousands of dollars per day if you fail to comply. There is even the potential of having your operation shut down if you fail to non-comply and you continue to fail to non-comply. Huge implications for a food producer. There's also a big upside, and that's what we're going to get into today with Sam at Danone. This is where things can get really interesting. So there's a potential upside here. By leveraging the associated risks of EPR, you have the opportunity to drive corporate attention and strategy towards sustainable packaging design. This right here, this regulation aligning with corporate strategy, and it's a chance to really drive meaningful work with a clear financial ROI. Magic words for anybody in sustainability, or if you've got the sustainability-minded professional. So there's potential here. So how does it work? Well, your first step is simply to get involved. The Designated Producer Responsibility Organization, or PRO, because we all love some alphabet soup here, for all states implementing EPR is the Circular Action Alliance, or the CAA. We'll have Sam explain a little more about that later, but as of now, all of your reporting will go through that body. So the next step is to register with the CAA. You'll need to formally register for every single state where you sell products that include covered packaging. This confirms your obligation and gets you into the compliance system. There are specific deadlines for this step, depending on which state you're in. Now, then comes the fun part of reporting. Reporting requirements again differ state to state, primarily related to the materials and how they're categorized and what's covered. Reporting will require or will include the weight, the material, and the volume of each material that you sell into that particular state, as well as the various recyclability metrics. This data is used to calculate your fees and apply what is called eco-modulation, which looks at how sustainable your packaging is. And lastly, you'll pay annual fees to the CAA. They're collected from all the producers and cover the collected cost of the end-of-life management. There is a lot going on here. But those are just the bare bones of reporting. Eco-modulation is what makes EPR interesting. Question mark? EPR eco-modulation means producers pay packaging fees that reflect how sustainable their materials are. So in states rolling out EPR, fees aren't just based on how much packaging you sell. They're designed to be adjusted up or down depending on factors like recyclability, recycled content, and toxicity. So the idea is to reward better design choices and make it more expensive to use bad materials that are hard to recycle. It's essentially a market signal. The more circular your packaging, the lower your costs over time. And that's something that we all want to do for the planet. In the US, eco-modulation is just emerging. States like Oregon and Colorado have been building it into their new EPR laws. But details, well, they're still being defined. Meaning, producers don't yet know exactly how those fees will be adjusted. Makes it a little bit difficult, but give it time. In Canada and the EU, it's already in practice. Provinces and countries have clear formulas. Materials that are easy to recycle or have high recycled content get fee reductions, while hard to recycle or toxic materials pay higher penalties, which makes sense. Dave will speak to eco-modulation in a little more detail, specifically around where the law is headed so that you can try and prepare a bit more. Now, once you understand what EPR requires, the next decision you'll get to is how you'll manage compliance. And there are really two paths that you can take. The first is to handle it in-house. That means setting up a system to track all your products and packaging and getting all that data together and keeping an eye on each state's requirements as they're rolling it out, which we know is changing a little bit at the moment, and making sure that your internal teams, from design and marketing to procurement, making sure that you all understand what EPR means for them. It takes a good amount of upfront effort, but you'll have full control and visibility over your data. The second option is to work with a solutions provider or a consultant, and this can be a great way to get up and running faster. You can partner with somebody who already knows the regulations and the tech, and they can help you forecast your EPR costs and make sure that your reporting stays compliant. It frees you up to focus on your core business and product innovation rather than just managing all those spreadsheets and all those deadlines. Sam's going to recommend this approach, but as in all things sustainability reporting, it's not always black and white. It just depends on your team's capacity and how hands-on you want to be with the data and the reporting process. That said, there are definitely some universal best practices, regardless of which reporting path you take. I'll talk about a couple of those. First, decide who owns reporting within your organization. Be strategic about who's responsible for EPR reporting. Remember, there's a lot of fines there. How are you going to use that data to drive impact across the business? Have clear ownership up front. And having that's going to save a lot of confusion later. As we talked about, there are very real ways to use this data to your benefit, not just saving money, but there's benefits within your organization as well. Next, centralize your data. Make sure that your packaging and sales data live in one reliable place, and that the structure aligns with what the states are going to ask for. The connection between packaging components and product sales volume data is key, as well as your ability to break down your packaging and its underlying components, because that's what you're going to need for reporting. This is where you're going to want to focus on a bottoms-up data structure, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. Third, stay collaborative. EPR compliance isn't just an operations or a legal task. It affects product design, procurement, and sustainability. Keeping everyone aligned on the target helps to ensure that design choices are moving the needle with a through line to ROI. And finally, at the end of the day, reduce packaging volumes wherever you can. While eco-modulation and circular design offer a pathway to reduced fees, lightweighting is still the fastest way to lower costs. Whew, that was a lot. So with that, I'm now going to hand it over to Dave Ford at the Ocean Plastics Leadership Network, who will get into some of the nuances of EPR reporting, how we got to where we are today, and where we should expect the regulation to be headed. Over to you, Dave.
Thanks so much, Rachel, and amazing job with that overview. Hi, everyone. Dave Ford here from OPLN. Really excited to tell you a little bit about the work that we're doing. And if I kind of set my goals ahead of time for folks sort of across from what I understand, this audience is really widespread across the ecosystem. Many folks deeply engaged with EPR already, and many at the point we're really trying to figure things out. I really like to get you in the mindset of the legislators in this country that are looking to continue to proliferate EPR. And I'll give you a little bit of context. So what you see right now is, a group that we took to British Columbia in Canada a few years ago. Our core mission at OPLN is that we're neutral conveners. So we do not advocate for any type of policy, but we work across the entire ecosystem and work deeply with legislators. So in the front row right here, you'll see Senator Heidi Campbell in the striped shirt from Tennessee, who's introducing EPR legislation there. We have the key leaders that are trying to get EPR across the line from Rhode Island and in Georgia, and in the key Senator Solomon from Oregon, who's passed EPR. So over the course of the last 3 years, we've taken 100 elected officials and immersed them into systems in Canada and in Europe where EPR is already in place. So we've really gotten to know this group. And, I think right now, 20% of the United States the population of the United States lives in states or 20% of the total populace lives in a state that essentially has EPR. And as things move, there's anticipations in the next few years that number could significantly increase. And obviously this affects businesses across the ecosystem. So just to tell you a little bit about Circle, which is our EPR program here at OPLN, we have two main buckets. So the first is the EPR Policy Circle, where we're supporting all these elected officials. We're building a legislator guide for EPR for packaging to help demystify this really complex topic, as Rachel, I think, really accurately laid out. We do a big summits. I'll tell you about one of them. We're going to do a Southern State Summit this year. We are also taking groups this year to Europe and Canada to do additional deep dives and learning. But we also work with a lot of producers. And we're working and building programs to support producers that are trying to figure out how to operationalize EPR. And we call that our EPR readiness circles, which are quarterly 90-minute sessions. We also do monthly office hours with consultants to basically deep dive and with concerns that all of these different teams are trying to figure out. And it's really designed for finance, for legal, for compliance, for commercial, marketing, R&D, and government relations. And it's multi-stakeholder with the spirit of helping companies that are trying to figure this out expedite the process. And for example, we have a Fortune 50 company that we work with, and 256 people inside of that company have EPR now on their job description. And they are trying to indoctrinate and socialize just what exactly that means, because things are really new. The first checks were just written in Oregon this summer, as many of you know. So we're really work to do everything neutrally to support, both the legislators trying to figure out what's coming next and our brand partners across the ecosystem. And we work across the entire value chain because the entire value chain is touched by EPR. So whether you're with your plastic, aluminum, glass, and paper material producers, your packaging converters, the CPGs across the ecosystem, retailers, we work across an array of circular policy experts and many of the companies and consultancies that are doing needs assessment in states, NGOs, and the waste management sector. And really at the heart of what we're doing is facilitating collaboration, deepening learning, and like taking elected officials and the value chain together to learn from these systems. You'll see Senator Brooks in that picture from in the far right from Maryland, who is in Montreal studying their system, their EPR and deposit return systems, to help better what they're doing in the state of Maryland. And just a quick snapshot of the hundreds of folks that we've taken to deep dive in these systems. And remember that this is, while it's new in the United States, there is integrated systems in Europe and in Canada that we can learn from. So I want to just give a little story about how this legislator guide came to be. We brought 26 elected officials and the value chain together in September. Next slide, please. And basically did a forum to educate with the 7 state sponsors that have indoctrinated EPR, the sponsors and writers, with 26 elected officials that in states like Virginia and in New York and Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Illinois, New Mexico, Nevada. There is like a wave of states that are considering EPR to try to help these legislators understand how to learn from the ecosystem, learn from the value chain so that these systems can be successful. And I think what I want to stress to everyone on the call today, when we were trying to figure out how, ahead of Sam and, his expertise, as he's operationalizing EPR and Danone, is what to expect, right? I mean, like right now, as Rachel mentioned, we have EPR in California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Minnesota, and Maine, right? So that's 20% of the population of the United States. If New York in 2026 is probably the most likely, and there's no guarantee, but the most likely to pass, that would all of a sudden take the numbers up to 25% of the people living in the United States living under EPR. But from a legislator perspective, their EPR, not just for packaging, but for mattresses and for textiles and for marine flares and for any product that you can imagine, there's quite a bit of momentum and wind at their back from a legislator perspective because of all of the EPR that's already passed. So there's actually, because of the environmental benefit, especially in blue states, there's a lot of urgency and a lot of momentum for these legislators to push additional legislation. And I think the challenges from the producer side and from many of the folks and the retailers that are on this call is that we want to, I think they want to, from what we're hearing from all of our partners, is like, whoa, we want to like figure out what's working and best practices. And so there's this balance of like political inertia and energy along with like, just corporate need for certainty that's just not in, because as Rachel said, all of these different states are completely patchwork, right? Like the last 3 states, I usually use the analogy, like the last 3 states that passed, which are Minnesota, Maryland, and Washington, think of them as different varieties of apples. There's a lot of similarities. They're not cookie cutter, but they're in the same family. The first 4 states, California, Oregon, Colorado, and Maine, are like a watermelon, kumquat, a banana, and a plum. They are like totally different, right? And that makes it incredibly costly and incredibly difficult for producers to just keep on top of it, right? And to operationalize this stuff inside of individual organizations. So What we are doing, and we were asked to do by these next up states, is to put together a legislator guide to help the entire ecosystem understand where all the different stakeholders sit, because the advocacy positions across all that, that wheel of different concerned stakeholders that I showed you are vastly different. And a legislator, like just to give you a sense of like a legislator archetype, Sydney Jordan, who is the representative, who is the sponsor and writer of the Minnesota bill, and she's writing our legislator guide, is a part-time legislator, right? So like, and she says all of this publicly, like she makes like $32,000 a year as a legislator, and she has to have a job as a state legislator, which, across the country, that's true in many, many states. The same year that she introduced EPR for packaging, she introduced 60 other bills, right, including a school lunch program and an environmental minnow protection bill. And so the amount of information that these legislators have to hold across the array of their platform of legislation is significant. And EPR for packaging is rocket science in itself. So what we're trying to do, in partnership with all of the different stakeholders we work with, is just help these legislators understand the complexity so that they can put their best efforts forward to make sure that this EPR works and it's consistent. So I want, moving to the next slide, and to really, like, I hopefully set up Sam in a good way as I pass the baton here. We found that like the EPR process, with our producer partners that we work with, is really in three phases. And maybe you can relate to this in the companies that you're in. Like the first is this, like, EPR is a hot potato phase, meaning it's sort of like, oh shit, this just happened. The hot potato comes, and then different people inside the organization are like, oh, I don't want that, or oh, let's go. That should go over to legal, or that should go over to compliance, or oh, sustainability should deal with that. Eventually, somebody lands with the hot potato, whether they like it or not. In rare cases, that hot potato is requested from an individual that maybe likes high degrees of complexity and pain. But that would be the first page. So then the second page was like the owners are established, the strategy starts, cross-functional teams are built inside of the organizations between the legal and compliance and accounting and the marketing and all these different, especially with packaging design, all these different places that are vastly important. And then phase three, and I hope, because of the state of when these checks are going to be due, that most of you are, in a phase two or a phase three right now. But that's when the teams will start to build a state by state strategy and hire consultants and meet regularly and start to indoctrinate what these new way of working inside of organizations and methodologies are born, right? And the internal alignment happens and external partnerships start to be born, so that this can be smoother. So to finish and to pass the baton over, back to Eva and back to Sam, I just would like to say that, like, this is going to continue to happen. I think, like, Virginia, for example, from a political perspective, just gained quite a few seats in their state legislature, and they have a trifecta. We know for a fact that, like, EPR is being deeply considered in Virginia, where it wasn't possible. And if you look at Polymarket, like, odds or Vegas odds, depending on what you're looking at, and just traditionally what happens in the United States, the opposition party picks up significant seats in midterms. And many of those states that I mentioned, in blue states and purple states, are poised, at least today, to pick up significant seats that should, if all this continues, a lot more EPR will be coming our way. So, like, the more that teams can understand what's happening now, the better off they're going to be down the road. So I'll put my email if anybody has any questions in the chat, but I just really appreciate the time, and thank you so much, everybody at HowGood, for inviting us. And I'm super excited to hear what Sam has to say.
Thanks so much, Dave. And I see some questions coming in for you that we'll get to towards the end as well. Now we'll turn over to the owner of the hot potato over at Danone. Sam, I'm going to take down these slides, and we'll go ahead and pick your brain a little bit about what it's looked like for you. So just getting started, why don't you take a minute to introduce yourself, including the work that you do at Danone, and then also on behalf of Danone at the Circular Action Alliance.
Sure, thanks so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Sam. I'm Director of Packaging Sustainability, so I lead all things to do with packaging, recycling, decarbonization, legal compliance, et cetera, for the US and Canada as part of Danone. And Danone is one of 24 founding members of Circular Action Alliance. So we helped to fund and form CAA in its earliest days. And so I have the honor of serving as a member of the CAA's board of directors as well.
Great. And again, to use the hot potato, we talked a lot about how it kind of gets, responsibility can bounce around, and it can be difficult to determine which internal team at a company really owns responsibility for reporting. If you don't mind, I think lots of us on the call would love to hear a little bit about what that sort of assigning of responsibility looked like at Danone, and for you, and how it ended up with your team.
Sure. Well, hot potato is the perfect analogy. We totally had a series of meetings with regulatory compliance and government affairs and sustainability and finance and all the functions you can imagine of, hey, there's this big new law coming. Have you heard about it? Do you know about this? And who's going to do it? Seems like really complicated and a whole lot of work, and totally got tossed around. I naively thought it would be really easy at first. So the first thing I did was said, hey, we're a global company. We're headquartered in France. France has had packaging EPR for many, many years. So why don't I call some colleagues in France and Germany and Canada and other countries where Danone operates, where EPR has existed in some cases for decades, and say, hey, how do you do it? What I learned was that nearly every country was using a different consultant. And if you looked at sort of the org chart of who does what and roles and responsibilities, it was different in most cases, country to country. And I realized that actually a lot of that makes sense. It was all built on smart decisions and different team structures for different country sizes. Here in the US, EPR is new, but we're a huge country. And so EPR is fast becoming the biggest in the world. And so the way we do things here may very well be different than the way it's done in Europe or in Canada or other places. Also, the consultants that we're working with, Danone entities in other countries, at least at that time, were not working in the US. So we had to really forge our own path. We decided to take a really pragmatic approach and sort of team up amongst the teams that made sense. So the packaging research and innovation team where I sit, we're responsible for all the packaging data, which is really at the core of EPR. It's the meat and potatoes of this, to use another potatoes analogy. And we partner with our finance org, so they make sure that we've got the right sales numbers and that everything is linked up properly. Our regulatory compliance team is involved, but they say, we don't want to hold this potato because we don't understand the data. We're not going to be able to catch the mistakes that your team can. And so they're really in charge of making sure that we're hitting deadlines, that all the paperwork is done properly, and they are taking our data and submitting it, making sure that that's done correctly. So we're all holding hands to do that. That's the way it's working now. It may very well evolve as we streamline going forward. But we've managed to get everything in on time, and I think quite accurately. So it's working well enough for year one.
Great. Yeah, we like to say sustainability is a team sport, and I think EPR reporting specifically, certainly the case as well. You've mentioned that Danone decided to attribute EPR fees back to the business units based on each unit's specific packaging material use. I don't know quite how unique that is, but certainly drives different decision making, right? It makes it a little bit more sort of personal, I suppose. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like at Danone and what the stakeholder management process was to get everyone there?
Sure. So the original plan from our finance team was to take our EPR fees and just divide them proportionally with all of our business units' sales. So for instance, I'm just going to make up numbers here, but say our yogurt business unit had 33% of sales, they would get 33% of the EPR fees. And I said, hold up, that's kind of breaking this chain of incentives that EPR is meant to do. We need to tie the actual packaging used by those business units and the fees associated with those packaging materials directly to the BUs. And we presented the numbers of sort of the peanut butter spread by sales versus the proper way of doing it. We're saying, okay, your brand uses lots of flexible film. That's an expensive fee rate, and therefore you need to pay for that. And when we looked at those two different scenarios, the real scenario had some big differences. And so although it's much more complex, we've done some work to sort of reverse engineer the EPR reporting so that we can split those fees fairly and appropriately to the BUs. And what that does is passes on the incentive structure of those that have bad packaging or more, pay more, and those that are already using more sustainable, more recyclable designs are rewarded for that. And I think that that's going to be really important, especially as more states come on. So right now we're paying fees for Oregon and Colorado, but once big states like California and more states come, those fees are going to be really meaningful and should drive change within our organization.
Yeah. Any folks who are on the call today and interested in pursuing this sort of allocation, any advice you'd give them to get that started?
I think it's really important to come up with a way either on your own or working with a data consultant, an EPR expert, to find the appropriate way to split those fees. So just like we have to roll everything up, the packaging for every single SKU, what it's made out of and how much to pay those fees, they all get aggregated into, say, the PET category, which might actually get split between BUs. So you have to be able to use that data to split it up appropriately.
Great. Okay, so let's talk more about incentivization, which I know you're excited to get into. So you've talked a lot about how you've managed to sort of capture the upside of EPR compliance to move Danone and move your teams more into sustainable packaging design. Can you speak a little bit about how Danone is doing this now?
Yeah. Well, first off, I think EPR is incredibly exciting to me. I've worked in this strange niche of packaging and sustainability for most of my career, and EPR is like a tsunami of change coming. I mean, it's such a powerful motivator compared to anything that's happened in the last several decades, really driving change. Some of that's the fees. Some of that's states like California saying, and Minnesota saying that if packaging isn't recyclable by a certain date, you can't sell it in the state. It's a straight up sales ban. So while we've had voluntary commitments to make all of our packaging recyclable, we're looking at some of these laws and saying we've got to accelerate. We've got to move up those commitments. And all the bad packages that we've been meaning to get around to change, but the business case just quite isn't right there. Well, a sales ban is pretty powerful for changing the business case into a red alert must do kind of a change. And so EPR has been extremely powerful in motivating businesses who have always wanted to do the right thing, but just couldn't find the competitive advantage. Now it's leveling the playing field where everyone has to do this, and those that can move fastest and first will have an advantage financially in the marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. So getting into the details, I know it's a long design life cycle, right? To move something from, okay, this would actually cost us less money. Let's design, more sustainable packaging material all the way to getting on shelf, right? It takes a while. Is there any specifics that you can give on what that has looked like for you at Danone and what that process looks like and what you all are designing towards?
Sure. I can't give away any secrets of cool packages or products coming in the future, but anything you find of ours, it's all labeled with how to recycle. So if it's got a how to recycle label that says not recyclable on it, you can be sure that we've got teams working on projects to reinvent that, to switch materials, to change designs so that it can be widely recyclable in California and nationwide. And so a lot of times that's it's not just a simple material switch, but it's retooling whole factories. And because we're a huge company, we often have 3 factories across the country that are all making the same thing. And nobody wants their favorite iced coffee that they buy every week to suddenly be missing from shelves for 6 months while we pause the factory, tear out machines, and build something new. So switching these things over does take a long time so that we can do it in a seamless way.
Can you speak a little about what that collaboration with those factories looks like?
Sure. It's collaboration. You said before, sustainability is a team sport, and EPR is a team sport. So it's collaboration with packaging engineers, with equipment engineers, with factory management and operators, with brand teams. Many of these changes don't just change the factories, but they also change the consumer experience. So how it looks on shelf, how you open it, how you close it, all these sorts of things. Um, may seem subtle, but can be deciding factors in consumers choosing one brand over another. And so these decisions to beloved brands that have, in many cases, been more or less the same for decades, now we're shaking things up and changing it. And that's driven in large part by EPR.
Yeah, I think we're ready for it. All right, last question. If we have any folks on the call today that feel like they're behind the eight ball on EPR compliance, caught many people off guard. There's so many things that each of us are responsible for, so many different reporting timelines. What is the single most important first step you would recommend folks to take if they're behind on
Sure.
reporting requirements?
Being part of CAA, I get to see the lists of how many companies should have reported and haven't yet, and how many companies are believed to have major data quality issues or their reporting just seems wrong. So the CAA team is working to engage those companies, but I think if you're part of one of those organizations, my advice is to get help. There's a lot of different solutions providers, consultants, and tools to help you manage this complexity. It's really hard, especially if you don't have a whole team to stay on top of all the nuances, all the differences state to state. CAA is doing everything they can to harmonize and make things as easy and simple as possible and has lots of great resources. So for sure, check out CAA's resources once you sign up. And if at all possible, I would find one of these consultants to help manage the complexity and double check your work because mistakes can be quite costly.
Great, thank you so much. We'll make sure to drop the link for CAA in the chat as well so that people can get in there today, perhaps. So I'm gonna move us back over to Rachel, who will speak a little bit about some product solutions, specifically HowGoods.
Thank you, Eva. And Sam, gosh, thank you so much. So many things in there just spoke to me, and to hear that there are other people in the CAA tool and just hearing that there are challenges kind of makes me feel that there is hope and there are people in this that are also finding it challenging, but there is a contingent of people that are trying their hardest, and that we're all making strides to do right by the planet. And this is a really important thing that we're all working on. So let's shift towards the practical and take a look at one of the solutions that are out there for sustainability teams and others to make reporting like EPR and the upside that Sam talked about a reality. So I'm going to start with a bit of context setting about HowGood. HowGood is a well-established leader in the space, known for automating sustainability reporting. Our bottoms-up approach to building products in our database has allowed HowGood to become experts in building product carbon footprints at scale. HowGood's industry-leading supplier engagement program focuses not only on food ingredients and looking at the building blocks of the ingredients of a product, but also the packaging materials and components of those products themselves, which has set HowGood up to be the perfect partner for EPR reporting. And along with our friends at Danone, HowGood has worked with many of the largest food companies in the world, from ingredient providers to brands, retailers, distributors, and restaurants. And at HowGood's core, we're sort of the research nerds. So our focus has always been on data, with the belief that with good data, people will make great decisions. So let's take a look at how that has become the most important thing for packaging and how data granularity is really important. So while we've been maintaining our expertise in food ingredients over the last couple of years, we've also been guided by many of our customers' needs towards sustainable packaging, both as a means to reduce corporate carbon footprints and to reduce that pain point of reporting. HowGood's advanced packaging module is our solution for handling the dual challenges and opportunities, as we've heard, of packaging sustainability. Sustainable research and development and climate reporting. It lets our users model and even build the most complex packaging materials using our bottoms-up footprinting structure, which translates into an easier pathway for the type of reporting that EPR requires. With Advanced Pack, you can do two things. First, you can design for sustainability. The Lattice platform includes R&D tools for low-impact, complex products. This includes R&D teams to model things like multi-layer packaging systems and rapidly find lower-impact designs using the same AI-powered abatement recommendations offered to our recipe formulators. And in line with our conversation today, you can report. We offer integrated EPR and Scope 3 reporting. Because the packaging unit is built component by component, it's linked to the actual food product SKU. So we can simplify that compliance with regulations like EPR alongside accurately calculating that packaging portion of your Scope 3 emissions. Where HowGood focuses is in unifying your packaging and your food data together. Something that many systems fail to do is because they operate in silos. But our platform brings those together and offers 4 advantages. First is those integrated footprints. We allow you to link the packaging products directly with the food products. This gives you to the view of the total environment impact of the product itself or the SKU itself, helping sustainability teams prioritize where to focus their reduction efforts, whether it's in the recipe or in the packaging. It allows you to understand where that focus area needs to be. And in the realm of R&D, we offer complex modeling. Our system is built to model multi-layered packaging systems from the individual components all the way up through to the pallet. We're not the only ones that can do this, but we certainly make it a lot easier and a lot more user-friendly than some of the other tools you might have seen. Our advanced packaging tools offer the same leading platform for engaging your suppliers for primary data collection. We leverage our core competency in supplier engagement to let you move beyond generic databases and collect supply chain specific data, which then integrates directly into your carbon accounting. And lastly, the key for EPR compliance, which is our linked material reporting. Since we tie your packaging material directly to the SKU, you're also seeing linked sales volumes, allowing easier direct reports for reporting. So if you submit your sales volumes by product or by SKU for the appropriate years, we can do the rest for you. So we can apportion the sales by state population and produce the report with a simple click of a button, really, for the relevant SKUs on request. So there is a way of making this a lot easier. These reports will, of course, differ state by state. There's a lot of work to be done, but we hold the nuanced reporting requirements for each so that you don't have to worry about that. Once we've onboarded your data, we can lock in those volumes for the corresponding reporting periods. We'll handle that complexity of calculating the implicated materials and organizing them according to the requirements of each state. Then all you have to do is upload the report in the CAA portal. For all, it'll leverage our bottoms-up reporting structure to break down every SKU's packaging into its individual components by weight, then roll those all back up into their state-specific categories. It'll link your packaging directly to your product SKUs for accurate reporting. And then lastly, since we offer so much robust data integrations, it'll be able to feed right into any master data management systems that you currently use. Now, with all that, I'll hand it over to Eva, and she can open us up for audience Q&A, and we'll be happy to address any questions that you have. And we'll also invite our Chief Research Officer, Arthur, into the discussion. Thank you, team.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Okay, lots of questions coming in. We're going to try to get to as many as we can, and there's always opportunity to follow up as well. Dave, Sam, Arthur, Rachel, feel free to jump in, to interrupt one another, to say, I don't want that one, I want the next one. Feel free to speak up. First, a couple questions that came in for Sam. Curious, this is from Paloma over at Bell Group. Do you use spreadsheets or a more automated program to ease the data collection process? So maybe you can sort of speak to your data collection writ large.
Yeah, to be honest, today it's a lot of Excel. Danone's in the process of transitioning some of our data systems, which is a global initiative. It's going to take a couple years, so the timing didn't sync up quite right. In the future, it promises to be the one source of truth for everything. The reality is a little bit messier for us. We've had some recent acquisitions where we've bought smaller food brands. Their data is all done in a different way. And so really it's been sort of gathering a dozen or so Excel sheets and working to plug them all together to match all the data and in some cases fill in some gaps.
Great. At the end of the day, it all comes down to managing spreadsheets.
Fair enough. But I think
you can speak to
there's a
this
better way for the future.
I think you can speak to this, but also maybe others. How are companies treating EPR costs? Are these as cost of goods sold or as tax or some other way?
It's cost of goods sold.
Great. Okay, a question I think, Dave, you'll probably be best suited to answer this. Helene says, recycling is a team sport too. Reimagining and lightweighting packaging is great, but what's happening on the MRF side? Are MRF retooling in any significant way to increase the stateside recycling rates and any other recycled resin streams? You want to speak to that, Dave?
Sure. I'm actually at the Solid Waste of North American conference right now in Columbus, surrounded by recyclers and MRF and local municipalities. So sort of deep in it. I feel like the interesting conversations that's happening at sort of a MRF level or a municipal level in the states that have EPR, and part of the needs assessment that are happening are like, what are the populations, what are the underserved communities, and how will these funds, and this is with the intent of these funds, increase collection capacities in the way of new MRFs, in the way of making sure that different parts of states, sometimes rural states. For example, I was in a conversation about Colorado and like the other side of the Rocky Mountains and how there's no collection and it's in the middle of the desert. And what are EPR funds going to unlock from that perspective, right? So like in most states, the money will go through the municipalities to the collection or the MRF. It's a little different in every state, but the idea is to increase capacity. Now, when you increase capacity, I live in the Catskills in upstate New York, a couple hours north of New York City. New York City takes clamshells. Where I am in upstate New York, you have to, you cannot recycle your clamshells, right? Like, so that's just like one example. So like, and Sam might be able to speak to this as well, but like, I think there's a hope that there will be continuity and consistency, when these programs are developed so that more materials can be taken, right? If you look at British Columbia, for example, they launched their EPR in 2014, right? So they have 12 years of data. We've taken a bunch of groups to visit Vancouver and the British Columbia system. They can take a whole lot more than any of the most places in the United States because of the ability for these funds to go to increase collection. So I don't know if that was like a roundup. Like the packaging design piece is one thing for sure. And the bonuses and the malices and when you get an incentivized for switching into packaging that is more like recyclable today, but there should be increased capacity and increased end markets, for recycled goods and recycled content as a result of EPR working and achieving, its kind of core mission and goals.
Great.
I can just expand on that a little bit. I think all these many millions of dollars that CAA is collecting from companies are getting distributed into the recycling system. So it's paying not just MRFs, but collection MRFs, in some cases going to end markets. And it's also education and outreach. So if you live in Oregon, you might have gotten postcards in the mail, you might have heard ads on the radio, hearing about how the recycling system is evolving and kind of leveling up and encouraging consumer participation. That's important too. And here where I live in Colorado, our recycling rate sucks. It's about half the national average across the state. Where I live in Boulder, the recycling rate is excellent. It's well above average, but Colorado is dragged down because recycling in many cases hasn't existed. These mountain towns and farming communities out on the plains, it's really expensive to drive a truck, up the mountain pass to the houses that are 2 miles apart. But the exciting thing about EPR is it sets sort of recycling standards statewide. So the same list of things that are recyclable will be recyclable everywhere across the state. And there's a convenience standard where recycling needs to be just as convenient as trash. So if a truck picks up your trash once a week, a truck is going to come pick up your recycling once a week. It's not okay that recycling, you have to drive it to the depot in the next town over. That's not good enough. And so there's going to be huge improvements across the whole recycling value chain coming from EPR. And that'll be phasing in over a few years. And here in Colorado, it's going to more than double the recycling rate as the target over the next decade.
Great.
I forgot you were in Colorado, Sam. I just set that up perfectly.
Yep.
We had a question about AI and how or if you can leverage AI in either calculating your EPR fees or in eco-modulation modeling. I think I'll pass that to you first, Arthur, then we can have others step in as you're interested.
Yeah, so I mean, the main place we're using AI is actually in support of the onboarding and ingestion process to accurately categorize and represent data directly from your bill of materials or your SAP instance or whatever your supply chain management system is. And so that allows us to very rapidly represent your actual materials, actual supply, and connect that up to your finished goods so that we can come back the other way to figure out the volumes of those underlying materials for you on your behalf once it's all in place, actually instantly. And so then the only outstanding task for us from a reporting perspective is not, we don't need AI for that, is just assigning the materials correctly for the states, state by state, right? And so that we do manually because it's a relatively small number. We do manually the assignment, and so those reports can be spun up whenever the reporting deadlines are approaching automatically. But in terms of lightweighting, in terms of packaging design, and in terms of changes that you can make, that's something that we're actually still working towards for packaging, but we've already done it for food, and we're utilizing the same structure, the same abilities to push AI recommendations into the packaging modules. So you'll be able to see not just recommendations that take into account the dollars, but recommendations that take into account viability.
Great. Dave and Sam, any thoughts on your end about how you're hearing from producers and using AI?
We're not using AI yet, but I think we probably will in the future for a lot of our reporting to streamline things. But I'm using Copilot every week, asking EPR questions where I remember I heard this in the CAA presentation, but what's the draft fee rate for this state going to be for this material? There's just such piles of information that's being thrown at us, and EPR is evolving so fast that AI has been a really useful partner to help me stay on top of it and remember and recollect key data that I need to argue a business case for a particular packaging change, for instance.
Great. And now anyone on the call who's having a hard time keeping track of the details, you can know that someone on the board of the CIA also is.
Yeah, I use the AI all the time to help me read bills or like compare one bill to the other. It's amazing. And I mean on the collection side of things, AI, what's happening is in AI and sort of advanced technology is really helping significantly in the MRF streams to like separate between materials. It's kind of fascinating. Google's leading a lot of work on that front. So, you know, I think there's also like a lot of stakeholders that are doing everything they can do to protect uh, AI advancements inside of these EPR bills as well, from like an actual sorting and collection side of things.
Great. We got a couple of questions coming in about uh, let's see, about our platform. I'm gonna go ahead and come to you, Arthur, on questions coming in from Irene regarding HowGood's Lattice tool, how we're supporting EPR and carbon accounting. So there's a few of them. Is that you can talk a little bit about the data upload process. Is it manual or automated? How do we handle supplier submitted data? So primary data that we get from our suppliers, what do we do with that? And then how adaptable is the system? If you're reporting in EU and US, what does that look like? You can take it away, Arthur.
Yeah, so data upload is not manual. We will need to do data discovery with you to understand where your data lives, depending on the, you know, we have companies with 35 SKUs and companies with 10,000 SKUs that they're responsible for reporting under EPR. We work out where your data lives and ingest that and maintenance is then automated as well. For supplier submitted data, we have a really refined system. There's a couple of people on the call who have been through our supplier engagement process for packaging specifically. And again, depending on the nature of the materials and how you want to structure your collection, whether it's material by material for purchased for say if you're purchasing RPET specifically from a supplier and you're manufacturing that, that's going to be different than if you're purchasing a bottle or a yogurt cup in its final form, right? And so all of those differences we can account for, and depending on those differences, it will be manual for the supplier or automated, because manual for some of these really specific where they're supplying, let's say, just the RPET granules that are going to Danone for manufacturing, right? The differences they're going to want to convey there are actually at the factory, and they're going to want to enter those manually. So we can support either of those. It is a standardized format, but the manual input is as graceful as Lattice is in general. In terms of adaptability, it's highly adaptable. The reports are canned reports that you get on request from your CSM in advance of the reporting deadline for you to review with exactly the SKUs that are relevant. And so those reports on the way out will basically the specific underlying materials from your BOMs and so on are assigned to the categories for each specific state or geographic location.
Thank you so much, Arthur. I'm gonna ask one more question. But after the webinar, if you want to come to howgood.com, happy to answer any questions. If you come into the contact form, happy to answer any questions about our packaging module specifically. Dave, I'm gonna give the last question to you. Is it a pipe dream that this will all be harmonized one day at the federal level?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and just use the whole poly market side of things and I would say that to look at the EU right now, right? Like they have like sort of base guidelines for the PPWR, kind of their main packaging law across all 27, and they set targets, you know, and there's a lot of autonomy that happens at the individual country level. I would say that EPR in the US, if you poll a lot of the folks that that are really deep inside this, they think it would probably be something similar at the US, where it wouldn't be like prescripted EPR, you know, that you really got deep into the weeds, but that could help with definitions that could help potentially with targets. I would say that, the crystal ball would probably say that it wouldn't happen under this current administration, that we would probably need the other party to win back control for that to happen. But like, I mean, I think, when you talk to a lot of the producers and the need for consistency and harmony, if we do see like in 2027, another 5 to 10 states come online and all of a sudden half of the country is operating under these principles, then like usually the state pressure will, and the need for harmonization at a state by state level will bubble up and something could happen. So I wouldn't push your chips in on this happening before 2028, but they're definitely working on it. And Rep Tonka from New York is leading the charge. There is stuff that is happening as far as like harmonized definitions and federal, but I don't think the political will is going to be happening anytime soon. But they're step by step and definitely a lot of energy around it.
I would just expand on that. For our business, it's really hard, in some cases impossible, to say we're going to sell this product only in this state but not other states. It gets sold all over. And so we really look to these different EPR laws and say whose law is the strictest and the hardest, and we're going to design our products for that, and we're going to sell those same products nationwide. So although it sure would be nice if there was some federal harmonization around this, that would really simplify things. It doesn't necessarily make a huge difference to the actions that we take.
So Sam, which state are you looking at?
I would say California is the tip of the spear and is the most challenging in many instances, but not everything. Oregon's doing some really unique stuff with life cycle assessment as an eco-modulation bonus that's never been done elsewhere in the world. So every state's got their peculiarities and differences, and so it's really a game of finding what's the leading edge that we need to comply to.
Great. Thank you all so much. Comments are coming in about how helpful this was. So really appreciate you taking your time to chat. Maybe we'll be holding another one of these in the future when new states come online. But thank you all. Have a great day and feel free to be in touch with any follow-up questions.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thanks, Sam and Dave.
Thanks, everybody.